The reason why people get disillusioned with everything is that the outcomes just happen so far into the future with the things that you're actually working on. And people just don't understand the mechanisms of how something that they actually do is connected to something that happens 10, 20 years from now. And that's like the challenging thing that we all have to deal with, right? Is thinking about how do we connect? How do we make sense of what we do today to what we get 10, 20, 30 years from now? And almost everybody kind of gives up, or they go in a different direction, or they don't understand it, so they get anxious and then they get mean. All of these kind of things is very much real human behavior. And the connections between what we do today and what we do from 20 years from now is very, very real. But, understanding why that actually happens is the challenge. And I think, the key thing, I think churches and religion and stuff have it a bit right, because, the idea that they have is basically like faith, right? That there's, you just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, and then you'll get into the kingdom of heaven, right? And that's the idea with it is there's a lot of good days, right? And those good days are easy, and you don't really need a lot of faith. But then there's also a lot of bad days, and it doesn't matter where you are, how much money you have. It doesn't matter. Any of those things. There's just a lot of faith that you need between implementing something and waiting 10, 20, 30 years for it to actually mature, and then pushing against the world, right? Like, that's the other thing, is pushing against the world that is making all these demands on you, that's expecting short-term results. If you look at almost everything that, if you look at almost anything that connects today with results and how well somebody does, it's almost always sort of pushback on completing this pushback against the world, right? Where you're having to do, so my kids do math, right? And they do math homework. Well, they don't like to do the math at the moment. They want to go play video games. Or, sometimes we have to do homework and not hang out with friends, for example. And there's this sort of pushback against the world where we decide to do this kind of unpleasant, not really good morning, unpleasant, not really fun task for the benefit of the future. And man, there are so many things like that. Now, the trick is to balance that, right? Because if you do too many times of where you're not necessarily, where you're making this trade-off where you're trading off, work to go for pleasure, or not to do pleasure, and you do that repeatedly, that's not good for mental health either. So it's like figuring out this right balance, or what how much should you be sort of pushing forward in that sort of conscious act and thought of what do we push back? What do we actually have to do? So, to give an example of that, I'm going for a walk. It is early in the morning, and I thought, hey, I can get up and do some work right away. But I thought it would be much more healthy for me to go for a walk. I'm going to feel better, and it's going to, change my perspective on the day. And so this idea of making connections between what you do today and what happens in the future is very real. And how we actually make sense of that is absolutely challenging. And we all struggle with this, right? Where we need all sorts of things, whatever it is, right? Like being drained or being sort of brainwashed, where we hear somebody like myself that's reminding you constantly about that, or anything that requires you to sort of remember that, where you sort of think about like, hey, just be patient, take your time, have that faith in the world, just push back against the world so that you can do things without being panicky, and just try to repeatedly do that. And then the other thing is to, not let your anxieties rise up and take over you when things are not moving fast enough, because it never does. Just have patience, have faith, whatever you want to call it. Just keep walking forward, doing the same thing that you do, and repeatedly do that. I think that's what we need to remember. It's just a patience game. And, partly it's delusional, right? There's partly delusion that happens when you do this, but then there's also that sort of faith component of it, where you have to just have courage to keep going, no matter what is going on around you. All right, take care and have a wonderful day.